Hello and welcome. I am your host, Nick Renard, and today we will have an episode on the top 10 decks that I would be playing in Modern right now. And we're gonna start it. They're not necessarily in order from best to worst or anything like that, but I'm gonna start with a couple of the obvious ones and go kind of branch off from there. So the first one I want to talk about is the latest the Spirit Jund deck that everyone's been talking about that recently won. It was a Grand Prix, I believe. You have in Jund is very simple. There's not a lot to it. I mean, obviously there's just some core cards in the deck like Bolt and Dark Confidant, Liliana, and Bloodbraid that just probably are never going to be leaving this deck. But lately, it's actually had some pretty interesting additions to the deck to replace some of the older cards, and I definitely wanted to go over those. The mana base definitely hasn't changed very much, other than you added white. But other than that, it's relatively the same. One of Jund's strengths is having a high number of manlands between the four Raging Ravines and the Treetop Village. The manlands give you nice reach once you kind of like Inquisition and Liliana everything out of everyone's hand, and then you kind of come back with manlands and Lingering Souls out of your graveyard. It kind of resurrects itself pretty nicely. The most interesting card lately is Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman is probably my favorite card out of Return to Ravnica. I'm a little surprised it hasn't seen a ton of play in Standard, except in the sideboard, and I've seen a couple people mainboarding it, but not quite yet. In Modern, it's great. It's completely changing the metagame, and it's definitely been an improvement for Jund. And it even sees quite a bit of play in Legacy. I was actually... we'll talk about Legacy later. The Deathrite Shaman is my favorite card that I would like to be playing with in Modern right now. I don't know if this is necessarily the deck that I would like to do it in, but Jund is a very safe choice. So if you're looking for a deck that is competitive, and I mean, this is essentially just the tier 1 deck in the format. So if you're looking to pick up a deck, pick up Deathrite Shaman, pick up Jund, and it's a pretty safe pick. The next edition that came out of Return to Ravnica was Abrupt Decay, which is one of my favorite pieces of removal that recently got printed because it is immune to Spell Snare, which is huge. Also immune to Spell Pierce, Mana Leak, all that stuff. So kind of an upgrade on Terminate. I also, in this deck, I've been leading more and more away from red, so I'm glad to see a solid 2-drop removal spell that I even like more than Terminate that is not red, because eventually I'd like to cut these bolts out of Jund and kind of go in a different direction, but don't get me wrong, Bolt is a very good card, and this is a very good list. Terminate's obvious why it's in here, Dark Confidant's obvious. The interesting thing, Tarmogoyf I put down to 3. Deathrite Shaman exiles so much stuff out of the graveyard, and I know we have Liliana to kind of like be making everyone pitch, and then Inquisition and Thoughtseize, which is why he still definitely has a presence in this deck. But this card makes your Tarmogoyf much more awkward, and this is another card I'm actually looking to replace in when I'm looking to brew in Modern right now. The presence of Deathrite Shaman and how much people are playing Jund is really making Tarmogoyf much worse of a card. Which is weird to say, because Tarmogoyf is such a good card. Liliana, obvious 4 of in the deck. I've seen people trying to run like 2 or 3. I definitely recommend you play 4 of her. She's great against combo. She's good against everything in the metagame. And once you play her on turn 3, like if you nut curve with her playing like the turn 1 Deathrite or turn 1 Inquisition, then turn 2 Bob or Goyf, and turn 3 Liliana, it's just one of the best curves that you can have in Modern right now. Next, the most interesting addition that people have seen to this deck is the Lingering Souls, and I actually am not against the Lingering Souls. I think white is a good color to start going towards. It's much more powerful than red, because when you're playing red, you're obviously playing the 4 bolts in the deck, so one of your win conditions is kind of like getting in there with hasty creatures and then bolting them to the face, and Deathrite Shaman as well can make them lose life, which is a good path to be on. Lingering Souls gives you quite a bit of reach with the flying as well. The reason that I like this card, it does well with a Liliana, because when you're facing an opposing Liliana and they make you both discard, I mean, it sucks when they play their Liliana first, but it happens. But they play their Liliana and make you both discard. Being able to discard the Lingering Souls is a big improvement for Jund, because originally there was not a single card in the deck that Jund wanted to discard. so they were always hitting a card with their Liliana. So in the mirror, when they're playing their Lilianas, or I don't know what other deck you're going to play against it as Liliana, so I guess it's just mirror. It's very good. It's also very good against Affinity, being able to block like their Signal Pests and, I don't know, some huge dude that they pumped up with Arcbound Ravager. Just having something there is very nice. Also good against Liliana's Sacrifice ability. So I'm happy with this card in the deck, and it's not surprising that it's been doing so well. Bloodbraid needs no explanation. That's an obvious 4 of in the deck. Sucks to reveal to Bob, but Bloodbraid's so powerful that there's no way you're removing that card unless you're just removing red altogether. So we'll talk about the sideboard here. Let's look at these 6 cards. So, starting over here, you have a lot of artifact hate. I mean, obviously, Affinity's in the format. There's cards like Vidalcan Shackles that you definitely want an answer to. Rakdos Charm obviously has other uses. It's actually used more for the exiling cards in their graveyard and the dealing 1 damage. Oddly enough, I never thought that ability would be useful until I thought about it with Splinter Twin in Modern. But you side this card in against Splinter Twin, you side it in against any deck with artifacts, and you also side it in if you're trying to get rid of their graveyard against like eggs and stuff like that. We'll talk about eggs later. So this is a very versatile card and also pairs up really well with these if you just need a massive amount of artifact hate, which when you're up against Affinity you do. I don't know why. I actually copied this list off of the person who I think got first in that I forget what Grand Prix it is. I'm blanking on that right now. But I don't know why Phyrexia Metamorph is in the deck, but I feel like this is one of those go-to cards that people just shove into their deck and they're like, yeah, I might use it. And I don't know. I like to have more reason behind cards in a sideboard than just, it's a fine card, you might use it. So Olivia Voldaren, I actually put these two together. Olivia Voldaren and Batterskull, it's kind of cool that these cards are seeing play now, because I think originally their 4 mana cost and 5 mana cost were just a little bit too much for decks that weren't actually ramping. But now that you have the Deathrite Shaman to ramp you, it's actually pretty viable to play an Olivia on turn 3 or a Batterskull on turn 3 if you have the nut curve, or turn 4 is much more likely. Batterskull is a house in the mirror. It's great against aggro. Olivia is kind of the same way. If you're playing a creature battle, she just completely takes over the board very, very quickly and gets out of range of things like Bolt very quickly as well. Also immune to Abrupt Decay, so that's nice as well. Maelstrom Pulse is a card I'd like to start seeing more in these decks. I'm a little surprised that people have been cutting back on their Maelstrom Pulses when they started leaning towards this Lingering Souls strategy. Like, these used to be in the 2 of in the main board, and now people aren't playing them at all, which surprises me. I'm definitely glad to see it in the sideboard, but don't forget that having access to catch-all removal like Maelstrom Pulse and even Abrupt Decay, I don't want to call Abrupt Decay catch-all because it's not, but it hits most of the stuff that you need to. So don't cut this. My recommendation is do not cut this card from your Jund decks. Grim Lavamancer, I like Grim Lavamancer a lot right now, mainly because of the presence of Deathrite Shaman. When they try to exile the land with their Deathrite Shaman, or they try to exile an instant or a sorcery or whatever, you can use the Grim Lavamancer in response. Their activated ability, well, it'll kill the Deathrite Shaman, and then the activated ability will also fizzle. The Deathrite Shaman obviously has an advantage with the 2 toughness is extremely relevant. Things like Flame Jab or whatever in those old Seismic decks. Zealous Persecution, the Deathrite Shaman lives through that. Stuff like anything that does 1, it's nice that the Deathrite has an edge on the Lavamancer there. But I do think that this is a good card against this card. So I thought that was kind of cool to see that in the sideboard. And Rule of Law you obviously have against Storm decks. So there you have it. Jund is pretty basic.